The Square Ball Podcast.
Well, welcome to the show. Then we've got together for another view from the press box. Dan here with Michael from the Square Ball and Phil Hay from the Athletic. Show brought to you by
West Yorkshire Electrical. Do you need more?
Please, if you don't mind.
You need more? All right. What sort of thing they do?
Well, the fact that they're a fully accredited electrician would be useful to convey. If it's got wires, they will work with it. They do the usual range of services. They're specialists in renewables, remember?
Correct. Solar panels, battery storage, car chargers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you know where you put your solar panels, don't you?
On your roof.
You do. And what happens when you've had that done? Oh, bloody hell, my roof's a mess. No, it's not.
Because they've got their own roofing people.
And they don't just do the solar panels on the roof. They will do the roof as well. So you've got roofing stuff. Electricians and roofers.
If you've got wires in your roof, they'll work with it. That's what they say.
Yes. And even if you don't have wires in your roof, which is probably for the best, unless you've got lights into your loft, which brings you in, Phil, doesn't it? Look at how neatly that was done.
Very good. We've got a leaking roof this morning, a faulty boiler, and also, owing to the wind, all the wires have come off the guttering and are hanging all over the place on the front of the house. So literally nothing that West Yorkshire Electrical couldn't sort, probably.
Yeah, we need to start a GoFundMe for you, never mind getting West Yorkshire Electrical in. Don't we? wyelectrical.co.uk for details. They're on your socials as well. Right, yeah, let's start at the most recent news that we've had in the last 24 hours, which is that the Rat has deserted the not sinking ship, the very much floating ship, but Sinisterra off to Bournemouth permanently, 20 million quid or thereabouts, Phil.
Sinking as it was last season, but you're right, not so much this season. I would imagine by the time people listen to this will probably be confirmed. We're just waiting Friday morning for it to be formally announced, but Leeds and Bournemouth both planning to do that today. Deal agreed. From the Leeds end, they're saying that they won't be making a loss on him on the basis of the fee that was paid to Feyenoord this summer previously. I don't think that means anybody will pretend that this has been in any way a success, and they certainly won't be making anything significant in terms of a profit. At the Bournemouth end, keen to point out that this is for less than the option that was in the deal when he went on loan at the start of the season. And I think that there are a few factors at play here. Firstly, Bournemouth really want to keep him, so he'll become permanent immediately. Leeds saw no way of him coming back, and I think this will be the beginning of a traipse of players who were here in the relegation season leaving permanently or certainly going elsewhere for the longer term.
Got a feeling that those bridges were burned when Angus Kinnear came in at the start of the season.
There was no way back. I mean, it was similar with Tyler Adams, really. The reason that was done was because it had got so bitter and twisted at the crucial point where it was stay or go, and Adams decided he wanted to go. Similar with Sinisterra, the threat of legal action towards the end of the last window meant that there was no real way back. A bit of bad blood there. I think it would have been extremely difficult for him to have come back and played in front of the crowd, although I always say this, if you come back and play well, people do tend to forget these things fairly quickly, but it was never going to happen realistically. For Leeds, it will help their FFP position, PRS, whatever it's fashionable to call it at the moment. Certainly help their accounts for this year. Sinisterra going and that money coming in, and I think the way it had to go, by all accounts, he's had injuries down at Bournemouth, but they seem happy with him, and he has had good performances. They wanted him to be part of the long-term plans, and I think what this does is it means that they get him on board before they potentially get smoked by rival offers from elsewhere later in the summer.
And presumably Sinisterra himself has been waiting until Bournemouth appear completely safe before committing to this, because as we know, the Championship is well beneath him.
It's very hard to say. I don't know what Sinisterra is thinking about this, but you would imagine that there was no particular enthusiasm to get relegated again. I would say. I think he'll see this as a decent move for him because they probably are going to stay up, aren't they? But then again, and we had this discussion about Nonto and the possibility that he might sign a new contract and stick around with Leeds. If Leeds do get promoted, then it's not at all a bad club to be with in the Premier League. So who knows how this is going to work out for Sinisterra longer term. But I think Dan's right. There is a PRS aspect to this, but the bridges were burned back in August in the same way as they were with Tyler Adams. Adams went permanently, so there was no longer any issue there in terms of what you're going to do with him further down the line. But with Sinisterra, I always felt like he would depart on a permanent basis too, and I think the same applies to various other players who are out on loan.
Who knows how this works out, but let's wish him well.
Yeah, all the best.
Very best.
Luis, all the best in your new career. See you soon, hopefully. The PRS aspect, we were chatting about this, weren't we, via WhatsApp? Just saying, trying to work out exactly what it is. It's somewhere we think north of about 5 million quid they've trousered. in terms of FFP headroom, which is, I know it's not exciting, but it's very pertinent when you're in the Championship. And we know that there are pressures this year to sort out the PRS side of things. There's, come the summer, if we don't go up, there's going to be a little bit of adjustment needed. I think it's the summer that's...
and this helps. It's the summer that's more of a problem, is my understanding, than right now. And clearly any extra headroom in PRS isn't going to help when it comes to the transfer market here and now, because the window is closed and the die's cast for the rest of the season. I think we were chatting before, either last podcast or the one before that, about the feeling in the game that before June the 30th this year, there's going to be a massive scramble. I don't mean just at Leeds, but if Leeds don't go up, I think they'll probably be part of this. Quite a big scramble to get players out and money in before the end of the accounting period, the financial year.
Yeah, because the football calendar ends on June the 30th, doesn't it? And then the new season starts on July the 1st. So if you want to get stuff into this year's accounts, you sell them before June the 30th. Yeah,
basically to make sure that your accounts hit the marks that they've got to hit and get beneath the benchmarks that they have to for FFP, PRS, whatever. I think you'll see a fair amount of that.
It's PNS, isn't it? I think didn't you call it PRS, but isn't that a music thing?
Yeah, PRS is a music thing, you're right.
Profit and sustainability we talked about.
Sorry, I'm calling it PRS, it's PSR.
Yeah,
PSR in the Premier League, yes.
Profit and sustainability rules, but I think it's called PNS in the EFL. So it's known as FFP, Financial Fair Play, PRS, which is the music reporting service.
I was going to say, that's what you started calling it, and I was thinking, that's a different thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
PRS requirements were fine on, aren't we? Just play the Kaiser Chiefs, the Skylights.
Yeah, they get their PRS payments, everyone's happy, yeah.
One of the reasons I've got PRS stuck in my head rather than PSR is that it keeps, for some reason, auto-corrected on WhatsApp when I send it through, and I can't imagine it's for that reason, but it is quite annoying. Yeah, you're right, they've always called it PNS, Profit and Sustainability, in the Championship. For a long time it was FFP in the Premier League. Everybody seems to be moving towards PSR. So shall we start with PSR?
Well, I'm just looking
if I can remember it.
The EFL regulations seem to be calling it P and S for now. Or is that last year's regulations because the website's out of date? Who knows?
Basically, it's the amount of money you're allowed to lose on certain things, including transfers and the things that they're trying to control, i.e. wage bills, transfers.
But like building on infrastructure doesn't get counted, and youth stuff doesn't get counted.
There's a lot that is exempt, which is why it's so complicated, and why when somebody gets charged, a club gets charged like Everton, there's a massive argument about it because there are a lot of intricacies, a lot of nuance to it, and you can... you know what it's like with these things. You can make it show anything if you want to.
How does this work contractually? Because we're obviously outside of a transfer window now. So, is this allowed? When does he officially transfer?
Well, it's the transfer of registrations, isn't it? And correct me if I'm wrong here, Phil. So you can transfer registrations. If he's on loan, you can then convert it to a permanent. But the chances are this will go through in the summer. Is that right?
No, we're told that it'll be permanent today.
Immediately?
Yeah, it will become permanent immediately. There was the talk of it possibly becoming permanent just before the end of the transfer window. But I think the only reason that Bournemouth would have been in any rush to do that would have been if they'd needed another loan slot in the squad.
And also it might have meant that somebody else became available to loan out of Leeds potentially if he'd gone before the end of the window, and you don't want to create that opportunity, do you?
There also would have been that, although that obviously applies to foreign loans rather than domestic loans. So yes, it might have opened the door, but I don't think, unless memory fails me, I don't think there was anybody kind of falling into that category that Leeds desperately needed to move on in the manner that they've moved on Aronson, Christensen, Llorente and others. And I think once we get to the summer, this was, I suppose, a fairly easy one to deal with because Bournemouth were very keen to keep Sinisterra in the same way that I think Everton would be keen to keep Jack Harrison, but obviously not if they go down. That won't happen. But I think you'll find other mid-table Premier League clubs who would probably take Harrison as well. So my gut feeling is that he'll go and they'll pull in money from that one. But there'll be others who are not so easy to sort out. Aronson being, I think, a particularly good example because it hasn't gone well for him on loan.
If you haven't glazed over already, I can assure you now that Section 5, Appendix 5, of the EFL regulations, which I am now eyeballing on their website, it's titled Financial Fair Play, and then we operate under PNS. So FFP, Financial Fair Play, and PNS are interchangeable pretty much.
But PRS, nothing to do with it.
PRS, nothing to do with it.
Is when you play music on the radio or in the store and somebody gets some royalties.
But PSR seems to be the fashion.
Yeah.
So if you hear PSR, that's basically it.
So that's when we get back to the Premier League, we ditch the ampersand and we add the...
It's the same thing, but obviously in different divisions there are different rules and different limits and so on.
I've had enough for that.
Yeah. Sinisterra is gone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just a move that suits all parties, doesn't it? Basically.
It had to happen. Yeah, it did.
And
Talk to us about your trip to Plymouth anyway, Phil.
Oh, it was fantastic. Do you know, though, there was karma, though. Since I didn't go and we didn't send, Tuesday morning was when my boiler broke down. So the house was even colder than it would have been at Plymouth in the wind and the rain.
Have you got that sorted yet? Because I know you were on the phone to the plumber just before we started recording.
No, still soldiering on.
Your pipework's not working.
Aye, still needing sorted. It was a good win, though, down at Plymouth. It was. I thought they were comfortably the better team. I thought they got Plymouth right where they wanted them, which was to the point where Plymouth looked absolutely exhausted as the game went on. And again, just should have won it in normal time, I think, but just that quality off the bench, Somerville in particular, but Ruta able to change it. And a nice little tie away at Chelsea.
It's what your kids do, isn't it? They basically nag you and nag you and nag you about something over and over and over till eventually you're just too tired and cave in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was exactly that.
Just take my PIN number. Yeah.
The funny thing is, looking at the Villa-Chelsea game, I was thinking to myself, the game, the more difficult game of the two options there feels like Villa away, until I sat and watched Villa against Chelsea and haven't seen Chelsea play as well as that all season, I don't think. And did think to myself, if they play like that against Leeds, that becomes an incredibly difficult tie. But it's also a really good tie. And one to, I think, properly look forward to.
It feels less predictable. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Feels less like you could say that's a nailed on home win. It should be a home win for them because they've spent £1 billion on footballers and they're in the Premier League and we're in the EFL and we haven't.
I think the FA Cup really likes this game, this sort of fixture where you've got, like you say, very expensive squad that hasn't really come together at all over the season anyway, but can play like that on Wednesday night. And when they do play like that, you do suddenly realise that there are some absolutely quality players in that squad, which goes without saying on paper, but you sometimes need to see them perform like that. And I think it's been a real struggle for them individually to perform in a way which has kind of matched the amount of money that's been paid for them. But Leeds are in such good form and have played really well themselves this season. So there's genuinely that little chance of an upset in this game. And if Leeds play well, I think it'll be close.
It'll be an interesting benchmark, won't it, of exactly where we are. And they've got the league. Yeah. They've got the League Cup final on the Sunday just beforehand. So you hope that maybe do they win it? Are they tired? Whatever it might be, that it just has some sort of bearing on the outcome.
And as you say, good way of gauging how these players in Farke's squad match up to what are, top, regardless of where Chelsea are in the table, top level Premier League footballers. How many of these compare well? How many of them don't? If it continues to go well for Leeds and if they get up from this division, it's not going to be long before they have to seriously think about what they're doing for the Premier League. And Farke will have to think about that in terms of personnel and in terms of tactics. I don't doubt they'll be thinking about it already. But it will be a good comparison.
And we're on ITV4, so it's live on the telly again, this one. Michael, you used to work at ITV. Any good memories of ITV4?
Oh, it was always a good sponsorship to have.
Yeah.
It was frequently available.
Yeah.
Very good sort of 16 to 34 male demographic, pretty cheap way of getting into it. Yes, did a job.
Oh, excellent. Thanks for that.
You'd be paying a premium though on the football.
Live football, yeah.
Yeah, you'd be looking at.
It's a harder to reach audience, isn't it?
Yeah.
ITV were like the prototype for the chant, weren't they? Which is now, swayed very much towards.
What's the chant, Phil?
Well, you tell me, but they're swayed very much towards.
Just say it so I can clip it and put it out there.
What, ITV is fucking shit. As somebody said to me after Histon,
nailed it. The downfall begins now.
Whoever put that microphone right in front of the away end, within reach of people who could grab the wire and pull it into the away end, was kind of asking for trouble. But there are going to be so many rearrangements now before the end of the season. We've got Sheffield Wednesday on a Friday night, which seems like an interesting decision to me, given what's gone on Friday nights there before when Leeds have been in town. But I think it's going to be pretty relentless now, the changes to the schedule,
particularly with the reaching the FA Cup final.
Well, of course, yes.
Yeah, I saw somebody somewhere saying that after this Rotherham game this weekend, our next 7 games are all televised. So we've got Swansea, which is televised on Sky. Plymouth is going to be on Sky. Leicester, Sky. Chelsea's going to be on ITV4. Huddersfield lunchtime kickoff, Sky. Tuesday night Stoke, Sky. So on and so forth. So and then there's the Friday night at Hillsborough, which brings back some interesting memories. Friday night under the lights at Hillsborough. What could possibly go wrong?
That is by a mile the most poisonous night all joking aside, I've ever covered really and written about. But the Leeds just produce such big viewing figures in the Championship that there's always been this magnetism that is. I mean, and we've spoken to Sky over the years about it, and they always say, look, we do take care with picking the schedule. We think carefully about the games. But you only have to look at the end of each season to see how many times Leeds have been on the telly to make you realise that's where the numbers are, and that's increasingly true when they're going for promotion. If this was a 15th place finish season, then there is still the appetite to show Leeds because you get big numbers regardless. But in competitive terms, and in terms of what the games actually mean, sometimes they're quite difficult to justify. Whereas now you could put Leeds on every weekend and you don't even have to explain yourself, do you?
Did you hear the chant that went up early in the game at Plymouth, which is, if you're watching on the telly, you're a Charlie uniform November Tango?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that was directed at you, Phil?
It probably was, yeah. Guilty as charged. if the cap fits.
Your boiler's going to go in the morning.
It's already gone, yeah. Boom. Well, you might have noticed that the weekend of the Bristol City game was football's annual green weekend. And as the club and other people are trying to point out, there was no public transport home after that game. So it's nice to give the impression that you care, really, isn't it? But in the end, I say this all the time, your match-going fans just seem to be lower and lower and lower in the priority list.
It's the wokerati, Phil, I'm afraid. It's the wokerati have taken over.
The wokerati. Everything you don't like, woke. Yeah, it's just.
Are we doing this now? Have we pivoted?
Well, this is the way to hoover up big audience now, isn't it? You just
say woke and everybody
pivot massively to the right, say some controversial stuff, hoover up those numbers.
Yeah. Well, just
don't forget to like and subscribe, guys.
Basically, anything you don't like. So my boiler is definitely woke because it's broken down. And is refusing to work. So yeah, it just seems to be how it is. Isn't it? Well, don't like this, it's woke.
It's been snowing in Leeds. Did you enjoy the government clouds putting out the snow in the last 24 hours?
I thought it was going to be global warming. It's snowing. Hey? Anyway, it was all right. Flat Earth anyway, so there's a different weather system at play.
It'll just drip off the edges, won't it?
Probably. The ice wall around the edge. That's what I heard.
The weather was wild at Plymouth. I mean, the pitch was...
Look at Phil trying to be all professional.
The pitch was almost not quite unplayable, but do you know what? There were points in the game where you thought, imagine if this got abandoned. Going to have to do this again next week.
We were reminding ourselves of the Arsenal, and it's slightly before your time, but I was talking about the Arsenal Cup run in 1991, which we did an extended look at that, didn't we, somewhere over on the Extra Ball as well, so members can find that. The 4 games, which, imagine this, kids, FA Cup 4th round, and we had to play Arsenal 4 times because the teams couldn't be separated. And I remember the final game, the 3rd replay at Ellen Road, when we lost, and there was just a general sense of relief. Like I'm sick of Arsenal. Absolutely sick of them.
We did a piece on that. I spoke to Lee Dixon about it, and he said, honestly, if you've had Strachan in your ear for that many times over that short period of time, you just want that game to be over, that tie to be done with one way or the other, which it was eventually.
So yeah, Chelsea, the proverbial free hit in the next round. It feels like it a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like we could have some fun, cause some mischief. If we go out, it's fine. Concentrate on the league.
Bamford to go back and do the business against
one of his many former clubs.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
Why not? And Ampadu as well.
Yep.
Just signed from Chelsea. Have we got any of the Chelsea links in the squad at the minute?
Lewis Bates guy, isn't he?
Oh. Does the winner get to keep him?
I think MK Dons might keep him. if they want
Good answer. Good answer.
Well, we turn our attention to Rotherham at the weekend, which is the far more pressing matter, isn't it? And actually, it's becoming a nice distraction, I think, is the Cup now. I was a bit worried that it was going to kind of derail the season a little bit, as is always the case, isn't it?
I've said to you before, though, I just don't have experience or memories of seasons where getting bluted in the Cup is good for you at all.
No. Well, we turn our attention to far more pressing matters, Phil, and Rotherham at home. And consulting the league table, they are very much bottom of said league table.
What's their away form like?
I'll come to that in a minute, don't you worry.
Oh, good.
I'm going to suggest it's bad because they've won 3 games all season. They are on 19 points.
Very much down, I'm afraid.
12 points from safety. Although that game in hand they've got over Huddersfield could come into play further down the line.
Yeah, you can see that. Yeah. As Marsh said about last season, they're actually on 22 if you think about it. I thought earlier in the season that the game that if Leeds were, say, to miss out on second place by a really narrow margin, or the title, the game that they might regret most would be the 0-0 draw against Wednesday at Ellen Road, given how bad Wednesday were at the start of the season. And Wednesday haven't improved that much really, but I've started to pick up some points. But I actually think the game that will probably annoy Farke as much as any will be or at least, will be the game at Rotherham, where I just think on that night they were a bit complacent, Leeds, weren't they? It looked as if it was going to be a bit too easy, and you could almost see in the body language that it felt a little bit too easy. And then that goal, the Rotherham goal, the game just flipped on that, and it was very different from that point onwards. And those were two pretty expensive points. But this is the sort of game that you're absolutely targeting. Good number of changes made by Farke in midweek. I think the pleasing thing about that Plymouth game was the ability to make so many changes and the system to still work as well as it normally does. And he's in that great position now, Farke, where he's having to decide who to leave out rather than who to include. There are a lot of players who aren't getting into the team that could justifiably argue for a spot in it. So could have done without extra time, but you'd like to think that the way that that's been managed will mean that they're as fresh as you could possibly be for Rotherham, given that you spent Tuesday night on the South Coast.
Happy to confirm that Rotherham are indeed bottom of the away form table. Do you know what they've done all season? They've played 14, won none, drawn 4 and lost 10. They've scored 9 goals in the process and conceded 34.
So we can't lose.
It's one of those games, isn't it, where, and any football fan will say this, it's not exclusive to Leeds. You'll go, there's absolutely no way we should lose that whatsoever. But there's always that part of you that goes, Wigan, Easter.
No, it's football though, isn't
things
it?
like that. It's 11 against 11 on a pitch. But you look at it, and we should go into this with complete confidence. But like you say, not arrogance, not complacency, and I don't think they'll be guilty of that. I think he'll be in their ear in that dressing room and saying, "Look what happened down there." It's
a good point. I mean, we're off to see Farke after this. He's talking at 1:30, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the press conference he does reference the first game and kind of missed opportunity there, which it definitely was. And I think on the night he came away thinking that was absolutely there for the taking. Had they just been a little bit more ruthless, and a bit like the Preston game, I think on Boxing Day, where Farke said afterwards that we didn't commit enough going forward. That I think was definitely the case at 1-0 at Rotherham. And then they equalised, then the game changes, and you wish you'd done it differently.
The way you look at Leeds now, do you both see a team that appears to be more confident in its own skin than we saw back then, when it still felt like it was sort of feeling its way into the division at that point, whereas now it feels like they've got a handle on it and we know roughly what we're going to get in any given game when we go into it?
I think so. I think Rodon at the back is now very firmly settled, as it feels like he's the leader of the defence. It feels like Gruev's impact in midfield has been huge from earlier in the season, where when we switched it around in there, it didn't quite work. And Reuter at 10 now seems settled as well. Bamford up top feels like that's not going to change until he gets injured. So it feels like there's more of an obvious structure to it all now.
I do think Bamford coming back into the team has made a difference. I think it's not that Leeds were struggling for results before he did come into it, but I said before, I just think the formation looks more natural, looks a bit more familiar. There seems to be a little bit more understanding there, I think. I mean, we should touch on Bamford, really, because what he was doing his BBC podcast earlier this week, and people will, I'm sure, have seen the quotes, him talking about how after his penalty miss against Newcastle, there were supporters outside his house when he drove home who he clearly felt very, very intimidated by. And I think it does kind of highlight the fact that there is that's pretty concerning, I think. And I it's not the first time I've said this, but I do think football has anger issues at the moment, don't you? I mean, people say to me, society has anger issues, and that is definitely true. But like, I don't write about society, and your podcast doesn't focus on society like we do football.
Where does it come from then? Because it's a function of society, isn't it?
It probably does come from broader issues and broader frustrations. But it's not like, and I know this isn't a great comparison, but it's not like you go to Tesco and you see people fighting with each other in the aisles and so on. Football does.
I've been to,
apart from Normanton,
the 24-hour Tesco in
is it particularly bad in
Batley once, and that was a bit fighty at points.
Yeah,
but it genuinely is. Football at the moment just seems to generate this excessive amount of frustration and, I guess, irrational responses to situations which are annoying and are disappointing. But you have to say there's an incredibly wide line between fair criticism of a footballer, and footballers should always expect that, and intimidation, and it's pretty obvious when you're crossing it. And I do feel sorry for him, because I think He's never been a deadly finisher at Bamford. That has never been his strength. But he is a good footballer. And I think when you get into the cycle he was in of never being that fit and missing chances, you're not in a good place, are you? But it can't be a coincidence that now that he's able to play and start league games back to back and able to get on a good run and is scoring goals again, that he's looking and is fit, his body's holding up. He's looking far more influential. And I think it's been a positive thing, him coming into the team. I think it was the right move at the right time when it did need to freshen up a little bit. But to go back to them looking more comfortable in the skin, quite often when you speak to players, they'll talk about confidence coming from what else you see in the dressing room. So what you know is round about you and the players that you know that you can count on. And I think we've switched from a period where Farke was very much reliant on the, not identical 11, but, was kind of minded to be picking the same team over and over again, to a situation where actually there are players now coming in who are making a big difference, having not really featured. So Bamford up front, Gruev in that defensive midfield position. I mean, I see no way at the moment in which Ampadu comes out as centre-back and Gruev gets dropped. But in saying that, you've got Struijk coming back further down the line. So if you did want to mix it up, you can do that. And Farke can feel confident about it. But I think also the players can feel confident about it. You've got Connor Roberts now as an option at right back. So if it's not working there's a really credible replacement, credible player who's done it before in this division. And Nonto now starting to score again as well. It really, really helps that. So yes, I think they've always been quite settled in the system and settled and happy with the plan. But it's starting to work on all fronts now.
Do you put Connor Roberts in? I think I do. I think if there's ever a game to put Connor Roberts in, this is it.
Should be a fairly soft start from you, thinking.
That's what I'm thinking, yeah. Which I know is, again, I'm not meaning to be disrespectful to Rotherham, but the table doesn't lie, does it? I'd
be fairly surprised, wouldn't you?
I think he comes on, probably, rather than starts.
70 minutes.
Comes on once if we get a couple up, he probably comes on and we give Gray a rest.
I think it's hard to justify that to Gray, I think, particularly on the basis of the way he played at Bristol City, where he was very, very good.
I won't be surprised, Phil, though. What do you think about putting Gray into midfield and giving Kamara a rest? I won't be surprised to see that.
That is definitely an option. I think the club are very mindful of wanting to make sure that Gray carries on getting minutes, whether or not it's in the centre of midfield or at right back. I don't think they wanted to sign players in a way that was at the expense of him getting games. And obviously it's not all about him and it can't all be about him. And you're right. I mean, it seems to me that Gray, and it is kind of tailor-made for that sort of advanced midfield position with somebody holding him behind, be it Gruev or Ampadu. But I'm not too sure that in these circumstances Farke would be rushing to mix it up in the same way that I don't think if Struijk was available tomorrow, he would, assuming everything's okay with Gruev and Gruev is fit to play, I'm not sure if Farke would want to move him out to move Ampadu forward to get Struijk back into the defence. I think he'd be pretty happy with how it is. And just to say on Rodon as well, I think Rodon has gone from being very, very impressive and very good to actually looking like he's absolutely got the measure of this division totally and utterly. And he does do all the basic things well, the heading and kicking. But you have to say that these days, like, recruitment departments just the last thing they ask about is, can he head the ball, can he kick it when it comes to defenders? They want to know, is he quick enough to hold a high line? Can he pass? Can he cover out wide? Can he slot into, various positions when he needs to? And he seems to be able to do all of that.
Does he have loads of mates we can bring in?
Yeah.
What's his brother like on social media?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great fun.
Yeah.
Just to go back to Bamford for a second, and
looking forward to seeing how his hair develops. Sam Rodon's, yeah.
In the Plymouth game, how did you think Joseph did up front? Because I felt like he was quite good and probably a more direct Bamford replacement than Pirro in some ways. If we were going to keep with the exact same format of the team,
I was pretty impressed by Joseph, and I think he will get better. It's interesting that he's one of the players that the club have backed, with a long contract, given that quite a few of the younger players have now gone either on loan or permanently. He wasn't getting bullied at all. Hit the bar, looked dangerous. I think there's a good young talent there, definitely, and didn't look out of his depth. It didn't look like you were giving a game to somebody who was then going to disappear for the next 4 or 5 months. That sort of, you're basically an academy player, but he'll have 90 minutes. I don't think he'll play that much because you've got Bamford and you've got Pirro and you've got Rutter and you've got, all sorts there. But he's going to be. He'll be in the squad for the rest of the season, definitely.
Yeah, he looked useful, didn't he? Putting himself about. Yeah. I like the look of him. Yeah, the question about the changes, I think, was probably with one eye on Tuesday as well, and going to Swansea with what might be more, classed more on paper as a more difficult game, I suppose.
I have to be honest with you. I would let Roberts loose at Swansea if you were going to do it in either, because it's the sort of
Swansea and all.
Having spoken to him on the day when he signed, it's the sort of game he'd love.
Yeah, and all the Welsh boys and their connections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back there. Yeah, it does make sense, doesn't it? I hadn't thought about that angle of it, because I think Farke has been conservative with the small C with his changes, hasn't he? Since we kind of got our fingers burned a little bit at Stoke earlier in the season, he's been more careful when it's come to the rotation since then. It's been when needs must, I suppose.
Yeah, he isn't a coach who goes big on rotation in the same way as he isn't a coach who goes big on substitutions unless Leeds are in a bit of trouble. But they have started to manage away games so much better. They haven't found themselves chasing away games in the way that they were too many times before the turn of the year. And that's really helped to close the gap, because at home it's just been win after win.
Ipswich against West Brom at lunchtime on Saturday.
Yes.
Then it's us against Rotherham, Southampton against Huddersfield, and Watford against Leicester, all kicking off at 3. We absolutely have to win, don't we? I mean, never mind, we should win. We have to.
I said that about Bristol City, and I still stand by that. I think it was a game Leeds had to take 3 points from. This one, 100%.
I mean, I can't see anything other than us winning this, but football's always got the capability of surprising you, hasn't it? But
Rotherham are 20-1. I just had a look.
Really?
Which in the champ for a game,
it's a 2.5 horse race, isn't
for a game in the Championship as well, where there's not. Well, I was going to say there's not generally the massive financial disparity, but I guess Leeds and Rotherham, there kind of is.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we've got the joint best home form in the division, and we will go clear of Leicester. Actually, if we win this, our home form will be 2.5 points per game. I mean, you can't get that much better, can you?
He keeps talking about that, Farke, as well, doesn't he? Keeps talking about the 2 points a game measure, and I think he's quite quietly confident that if you land on that and hit that at the end of the season, that it'll be enough. I think the average season, it absolutely would be. Southampton are obviously in very much the same ballpark as well, slightly better, which is complicating matters, and I don't see Southampton dropping a huge number of points either before the end of the season, so there is not much breathing space for anybody.
But our Kirklees dog-touching friends might do us a favour.
They won't, will they?
Will they not?
No.
Well, they did against West Brom the other year when we got promoted. You never know.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, haven't they got a exciting new coach? Who's their head coach?
It's Worthington.
Nigel?
I don't know.
One of his relatives?
Huddersfield Worthington, I believe he's called.
It will be somebody who sounds like they play rugby league.
The Mighty John. You'll remember him from the various battles around about the League One era.
I won't, because I've blocked it all out.
Blocked it all out. Maybe they will do us a favour against Southampton, but I wouldn't be, again...
You can't count on it. You've got to do your own job. You've got to do your own job, haven't you, Phil?
Well, yeah, one of the things we were looking at this week was, after Bristol City, where Farke was having a moan about the finishing and saying it's not good enough. And also, quite unusually for him, kind of said, if we want to get promoted, we want it to work out as we intend in May, then it needs to be better. And he doesn't often do that, does he? He doesn't often get drawn into talking about permutations or promotion in particular. He usually bats it off. But we had a good look at the finishing, basing it around about expected goals, which is usually the best metric for this sort of thing. And it is quite striking that Leeds of the top 4 are the only side who are underperforming on XG, which is to say that they should be scoring more goals than they are, and they've had opportunities to score more goals than they have. Ipswich, Leicester and Southampton are at the opposite extreme, where they've scored more than statistically they should have done. So if your glass is half empty, you would say, yes, it's underperformance and it's potentially costly. But I suppose if your glass is half full, you say that's an area in which Leeds potentially have another gear and another level to go to. And if the teams above them regress back to, their benchmark, and Leeds climb towards their benchmark, then, might just give them the edge.
If I could pick an ideal scenario, and this is stating the obvious here for this Rotherham game, it's that we do what we did against Huddersfield and absolutely run away with it in the first half, but then also run away with it in the second half too.
Yeah.
Keep running.
Yeah, don't take your foot off the gas. I know we've got the game on Tuesday, and Farke is generally minded to kind of manage his players' output, isn't he?
What you're saying is, if it could just be 8-0, that would be ideal scenario.
Get 6 in front at half time rather than 4, as we did against Huddersfield, and then relax for the second half.
Okay, yeah. Settle for that.
Fine.
Right, we'll do that then, and we'll report back starting next week and see how that went. God, there is still that part of you that always goes, but you never know. You never know. Football, though, isn't it?
It is football. It is football, but it's hard to make an argument for that.
Yeah, we'll get back together on Monday and catch up on that, Phil, and we'll see you then.
The Square Ball Podcast.